Heyo everybody! I'm Nick, and in today's video I wanted to talk about something that's been lacking in Fire Emblem Heroes for quite a while now, and that's specifically interactive multiplayer in the forms of co-op, a versus mode, specifically player versus player and not player versus environment style like the arena, and a whole big new game mode that can revolve around co-op, specifically raid battles. In the long run, I feel like adding multiplayer modes will keep Fire Emblem Heroes relevant for the next coming years. So with that, how about we go right to co-op? My basic idea for adding co-op to Fire Emblem Heroes would be to simply add co-op to all of the existing stamina modes so that 2 to 4 players can take on stamina consuming maps. 2-player teams can get 2 units each. For 3-player games, player 1 will get 2 units, and players 2 and 3 will get a single unit. And for 4-player games, everyone will just get a single unit. How turns will work, I feel like having everyone take their turn on the same player phase would make sense, considering skills like dance, skills like reposition or swap, and, rallies. So you're able to do that without say someone goes and then you miss your chance to dance for them, as an example. To make sure these skills function properly, they'll have to be used on a unit that isn't being moved around by another player. So as an example, the unit hasn't been moved yet, or the unit has already taken an action. And also to add, animations would only play out for the players' heroes they're controlling. For game modes such as Squad Assault, you'll build your teams like usual, like you would in single player, just with the restrictions with my multiplayer ideas in mind. So keep in mind the amount of units you get for your team slots with the amount of players you're playing with. And lastly, with the exceptions of rival domains and grand conquests, game modes that cost no stamina to play will be excluded from co-op, such as Arena Assault, the upcoming Allegiance battles, and all those other kinds of battles too. Also, to communicate with other players, there should be a batch of emotes you should be able to use to communicate where you want your units to go, whether you need an assist skill used on you, etc. Versus. This versus mode I had in mind has you playing against other players in live player versus player battles with teams of 4, with the option to play against random teams and people in your friends list as starting options. I'd have a cost for being able to play these arena-style matches being arena medals to give them another use other than refining weapons. A possible reward I could think of for winning these matches I had in mind is specifically feathers, and maybe possibly a refund of medals. I'm really open to suggestions here. This is a part with this and matchmaking entirely where I'm kind of struggling with, so as I said before, I am completely open to suggestions on these subjects. In terms of map design for versus maps, I'd like to give the defending player a slight advantage in terms of defensive terrain because they don't get the first move. So I feel like that would be a bit fair. With the option to be able to play against friends this way, you'd give yourself the ability to playtest specific builds you have against, if your friend has metagame defining arena units, you can test them with them, or if you want to go test unorthodox meme builds, you can do that too, and you'd be able to have full player control of what happens. This way it wouldn't be left under the eyes of an AI to use and to not exactly play the teams how you want them to. Also, intelligence systems can use this specifically as a way to see how units can perform in the player's hands, so they have more data on that sort of thing. And so they can, make updates happen for this sort of thing. Woo! And finally, raids. Raid battles would cost stamina to play, so this would incentivize co-op. With the size of my planned maps for raid battles, players would get use of 8 units, so a single player game would have access to all 8 slots for themselves, and then multiplayer will divvy up the slots as I will have determined here on the screen, as trying to say this out, as I've tried before, it's a little messy. And as to why I suggest so many units, because here's an idea I had for a little while. How would you like scrollable 12 by 16 maps? You could create larger scale battles this way, and it would be easier to recreate larger Fire Emblem maps from said games. And if you don't like the idea of scrollable maps, we can always fall back on the same size maps that we have for Rival Domains and Grand Conquest. But I feel like with a scrollable map, you could keep the same size of the 6x8 maps, so you don't shrink units and it'd be easier to move things around. From this point in, I'll have an example of a raid map I designed on the left of the screen here. Because I figured if I am going to be spitballing this idea, I should have some kind of visual to show what I'm trying to explain. I specifically designed this map each with different movement types kinda in mind. Well, at least the top left one, at least with cavalry. I tried. I'm not a map designer, so this is just a concept. People who are actually good at designing maps can have their own field day with this kind of concept. My idea for a raid boss comes down to being a 2x2 sized unit, at least in this example of the map. I kind of had it with 1 range, and any other kind of skills can be up to the designers, though I figure at least having innate distant counter in their weapon, in addition to any other skills, would give the boss a fighting chance against your player units. Also having them having triple-digit hit points, just so that you've got 8 players coming on a single unit, it'll need some bulk to take down. I also had the idea of keeping the raid boss's movement range to just a single tile, technically. Well, you'll see a 2x2 kind of movement of a single tile. And raid maps don't specifically have to follow this split-up design I have on the map. This was just something I just came up with just to have as an example. And I feel like in addition to the boss itself and the starting enemies on the screen, there should be some kind of reinforcements that come to pester you while you try to take down the boss. And why I feel like reinforcements would work on this? Well, the maps are larger by design, so you don't kind of get those really cramped reinforcements that you got in other modes, so I feel like having reinforcements spread out would be a bit more manageable. And to cap things off, I think there should be a turn limit in order to kill the raid boss, because otherwise you could just eventually stall out until the thing is dead. And you'll want your rewards, so you could have your point score based on, like, how fast you kill the boss, maybe how many enemies you killed, that sort of thing. The map, of course, should end when the raid boss is killed. Points for reward in this mode could be structured similarly to how they are for Tempest Trials, and you can even promote bonus units for taking on these maps, which means Intelligent Systems can make banners for these kind of raid maps. And lastly, you can have difficulty options for those who don't quite have the tools for, say, a lunatic or an infernal raid battle. Specifically having infernal be for those who really invested in the game. We don't really have a ton of modes like that outside of Arena. And that wraps up my basic ideas for multiplayer in Fire Emblem Heroes. And also, one last thing I should add. We should be able to visit our friends' ether resorts. You introduce the mode with no way to see our friends' ether resorts. Like, come on, Intelligent Systems, what's wrong with you? If they design nothing for multiplayer, add that one thing. Allow us to visit our friends' ether resorts and maybe, give us those resort points or whatever. That would be a nice little bonus. So I hope you like these ideas I kind of spitballed, and I hope you kind of take this video and spread it around. I feel like if you talk about it enough, maybe intelligent systems will keep their ear to the ground and maybe implement this sort of thing, or at least keep their ideas open. So I think with that, I'm Nick, and I'll see you guys next time in a usual Let's Play video.